The champion's name was Surachai Vongkham, and he had never lost, not once. Not in 17 fights across 3 countries. Not in the gym, not in the temple yards where the local boys would test themselves against him on Sunday afternoons. Not in the ring where he had broken 2 men's orbital bones and sent a third to a hospital in Chiang Mai, who reportedly never competed again. Surachai was 26 years old and built like something that had been compressed. Short, extraordinarily wide through the shoulders, with forearms that a Bangkok promoter once described as looking like they had been attached to the wrong body. He was Muay Thai. He had been Muay Thai since he was 9 years old, training under a man who had trained under a man who had trained under men who fought before there were rules. He was also, on this particular evening, in late March 1971, standing in front of a crowd of perhaps 300 people in an outdoor venue near Lampang, looking at the strangers in the audience with a very specific expression on his face. It was not contempt. That would be too simple. It was curiosity, the dangerous kind. Surachai had a habit, developed over years of fighting, of watching the way people held themselves when they did not think anyone was watching. He believed, and his trainer had encouraged this belief, that the body tells everything. Before a fight, before a single word is exchanged, a man's body is already communicating whether he has ever truly been hurt, whether he knows what it is to continue when stopping seems reasonable, whether he has the specific kind of quiet inside him that serious fighters carry. Surachai could read this the way some people read weather. He scanned the crowd that evening and found, sitting in the 3rd row from the back, a man he had not seen before, small, very still, Chinese by appearance, wearing clothes that fit poorly for the heat, a dark jacket over a lighter shirt, as though he had not quite prepared for northern Thailand in March. He was watching the preliminary bouts with the kind of attention that looked, from a distance, like simple interest. But Surachai watched him longer. The man's shoulders were relaxed in the specific way that people who have learned to relax them deliberately tend to carry them, not loose from inattention, but released from somewhere conscious. His feet, flat on the ground in front of him, were positioned in a way that had no name in most languages, but that Surachai recognized immediately. This man knew something. What happened next is, depending on who you ask, either a simple gesture of Thai custom — it was common for champions to acknowledge guests with martial backgrounds — or the beginning of something that the people in that audience would spend the next several decades trying to describe accurately. I spent time with 3 people who claimed to be there that night. Their accounts agree on almost nothing except the basic sequence of events, which tells you something, I think, about what kind of evening it was. Surachai stepped off the elevated platform where he had been standing and walked through the crowd. He stopped at the 3rd row from the back. He looked at the small Chinese man in the dark jacket and said, in Thai, something that translates approximately as, "You know how to fight." It was not a question. The man looked up at him. He had apparently been watching the bouts with such focus that he had not noticed Surachai walking toward him, which in itself was unusual. Surachai was not the kind of presence that people typically failed to notice. He considered the Thai champion for a moment. Then he said, in English, which Surachai understood but did not prefer, "I know a few things." His name was Bruce Lee. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall. He weighed 135 pounds. He was in northern Thailand for reasons that are not entirely clear. Accounts mention a meeting with a film contact in Bangkok that had extended loosely into a few days of travel north. He had no fight scheduled. He was not in any professional capacity that evening. He was, as far as anyone could later determine, simply in the audience because he had wandered in and found it interesting. What he could not have known, what none of the accounts suggest he knew, was that Surachai Vongkham did not approach strangers in the crowd on impulse. Surachai pulled a chair from somewhere and sat down beside him, not behind him, not in front of him, but beside him, angled so they were both facing the ring but could also see each other. He did this without asking, which was either rudeness or familiarity depending on the culture reading it, and he said, "Who are you?" Not who are you in the sense of what is your name. The name came later. What he meant, what Bruce apparently understood him to mean, was, what are you? This is the question the whole evening turned on. And Bruce Lee, who had been asked variations of this question his entire life by people who expected a simple answer, did something that surprised Surachai immediately. He said nothing. He turned back to the ring, where 2 fighters were beginning the ceremonial Wai Kru, the pre-fight ritual of respect, and he watched it with the same quality of attention he had been giving it before. Surachai waited. After maybe a minute, Bruce said, "How long does that take to learn, the ritual?" Surachai told him. months, years to do it properly. It was not just movement, it was prayer, history, the fighter's lineage made physical. So the fight begins before the fight, Bruce said. Surachai looked at him for a long moment. Yes, he said, that is correct. There is a version of this story in which what followed was essentially a master class, two men comparing notes, trading observations, each one finding in the other a kind of fluency and violence that had taken them decades to develop. I do not want to oversell that version. The truth, as best I can reconstruct it, is messier and more interesting than that. Because Surachai did not immediately respect Bruce Lee, he was interested in him. There is a difference. And Bruce Lee, for his part, was in a foreign country, watching a martial tradition that was not his, which put him in the position of a student rather than a peer, which was a position he had not occupied naturally since his teenage years. That tension was where the evening lived. Surachai asked him what he practiced. Bruce said a version of what he always said in those years, that he had trained in Wing Chun, that he had studied other systems, that he was working towards something that did not have a clean name yet. Surachai had heard of Wing Chun in the way that a surgeon has heard of folk remedies, acknowledgement without particular interest. He said, "Show me your hands." Bruce extended one hand. Surachai examined it the way a craftsman examines another craftsman's tools, looking at the knuckles, the calluses, the specific locations of wear that tell you what a man has been hitting and how often and for how long. He turned it over. He pressed on the palm in a particular place and watched Bruce's face. "You hit hard objects," Surachai said. "Sometimes, but not always." "No, not always." Surachai set the hand down and was quiet. In Muay Thai, the hands are almost secondary. The art lives in the elbows, the knees, the shins, which are conditioned over years into something closer to wood than flesh. A fighter who had developed his hands and not his legs was telling Surachai something specific about his system. He was not dismissing it, but he was filing it. "What do?" he said. "When someone takes you to the ground. And this is the moment, here, in the third row from the back, at an outdoor venue in Lampang in March 1971, where the conversation shifted into something that the people who were nearby apparently noticed even without understanding what was being said. Because Bruce Lee's answer was not what Surachai expected. He said, "I try not to go to the ground." Surachai smiled. "Everyone tries." "No," Bruce said. "I mean, I have thought about it more than most people. The ground removes options. It rewards mass. I am not interested in a game that punishes small men for being small men." Surachai was quiet again. Then, "So you have designed around your weaknesses." "I have designed around physics," Bruce said. Weakness is a different word. Something shifted in Surachai's posture, just slightly. The interest was becoming something else. What I find compelling about this exchange, and I want to be honest, that I am working from 2 oral accounts and 1 written description that may or may not be reliable, is that Surachai Vongkham was not a man who updated his views easily. He had spent 17 years developing a worldview about combat that had proven itself in the only laboratory that matters, actual fighting against actual people who were trying to actually hurt him. He was not going to revise that worldview because a small Chinese man in a dark jacket said something interesting, but he was, apparently, going to continue the conversation. He asked Bruce about speed, not whether Bruce was fast. Surachai could see that, or suspected it. He asked about how Bruce thought about speed, whether he thought it was trained or born, whether he thought reaction time could be genuinely improved, or whether training simply revealed the reaction time you already had. Bruce thought about this for longer than most people would have let the silence run. The preliminary bout in the ring finished. Another began. The crowd noise shifted and swelled, and neither man seemed to notice. "It is trained," Bruce said finally. "But not the way people think. You cannot train your nervous system to be faster than it is. What you can train is the moment before. You can eliminate it." "The moment before what?" "The moment before you move. Most people have a space between seeing and acting. A small space. They do not feel it because it moves quickly, but it is there. It costs them." Surachai leaned forward slightly. He had heard versions of this idea before. Inside Muay Thai, there is a concept in Thai fighting about anticipation that lives in the same territory, but he had not heard it described this way. "And you have eliminated this space?" "I have reduced it," Bruce said. "I do not think it can be fully eliminated. Anyone who tells you they have no space between seeing and acting is confused about what they are." This was not the answer Surachai was expecting. He had expected a claim. The answer he got was a correction of the claim he had assumed was coming. By this point, they had been sitting together for approximately 40 minutes. Neither of them had watched the ring in the last 20. The crowd around them, the people close enough to observe the conversation without understanding it, had begun to take notice. A Thai champion sitting in the bleachers, talking quietly to a stranger for that length of time was unusual. Word had moved quietly to the promoter. The promoter had appeared at the edge of the row, looked, and retreated without interrupting. He understood something was happening. He did not know what. Here is what I cannot verify and will not pretend to. Whether Surachai ever asked Bruce Lee to demonstrate anything physical that evening, or whether the entire conversation remained verbal, the accounts split completely on this. One person says there was a brief demonstration, something with hand speed that was over in under a second and left several people staring. Another says nothing of the kind happened, that both men were too intelligent to reduce the conversation to a performance. I genuinely do not know which version is true. I am not sure it matters as much as what happened around midnight. The bouts had finished. The crowd was thinning. Surachai and Bruce were still in the third row from the back. Surachai said, "I have asked who you are 3 times now, with different questions. You have not answered any of them." Bruce looked at him. "You haven't answered yours either." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was 2 men recognizing something in each other that did not have a convenient name. Not respect exactly, not friendship exactly, not rivalry. Something older than any of those categories. Something that fighters sometimes find with other fighters across all the barriers that ought to make connection impossible. "My trainer told me," Surachai said finally, "that the best fighters are not the strongest, not the fastest. They are the ones who know what they are doing while they are doing it." "Awareness," Bruce said. "More than that. Awareness of awareness. Most fighters can feel what is happening. Good fighters know they are feeling it. There is a step between." Bruce was quiet for a long time. Then, "Yes, that is the thing." He said it like a man who had been carrying an idea alone for years and had just heard it named by someone else from the other side of the world, in a different language, from a completely different tradition. This is the part of the story that the people who were there, the ones I spoke to, the ones who sat close enough to observe without hearing, say they remember most clearly. Not any single exchange, not the hand examination or the conversation about reaction time. This moment. 2 men sitting in emptying bleachers in Lampang, Thailand, having arrived at the same sentence from directions so different that arriving at it together should have been impossible. Whatever system Bruce Lee was building in those years, and by 1971 it was already taking a shape that his students could feel even if they could not quite describe it. It was not built from any single tradition. It was built from the intersection of all the traditions he could reach. He consumed Muay Thai the way he consumed everything, looking for the principle underneath the technique, the thing that worked regardless of what you called it, the thing that would still be true if you stripped away every name and lineage and custom and got down to what the body actually does when it has no other choice. Surachai had built something similar from the other direction. A man who had gone so deep into one tradition that he had come out the other side of it into something that transcended the tradition. They had approached the same territory from opposite borders. The conversation did not end dramatically. There was no formal conclusion. The promoter eventually appeared again, more directly this time, and spoke to Surachai about something administrative. Bruce stood, offered a single word of Cantonese farewell, or possibly Mandarin, accounts differ, and began moving toward the venue's exit. Surachai watched him go. He told his trainer about it the next morning. The trainer, who was in his 60s and had seen a great many things, asked what the Chinese man fought like. Surachai thought about it. "He moves," Surachai said, "like he is not trying to win, like winning is not the point he is interested in." His trainer asked what point he was interested in. Surachai did not answer immediately. When he did, he said something that translates roughly as, "I think he wants to find out what is possible. Every time, he wants to find the edge of what can be done with a body. The winning is just proof that he found it." His trainer was quiet. Then, "That is dangerous." "It is," Surachai said, "for the other man." Bruce Lee died in Hong Kong on July 20th, 1973. He was 32 years old. Surachai Vongkham retired from competition in 1976 and became a trainer in Chiang Mai. He died in 2009. I do not know if Bruce Lee ever thought about that evening in Lampang, I have no evidence he recorded it, referenced it, or told anyone about it. He met a great many people in those years. He absorbed from everywhere. But this is what I have come to believe. After spending a long time with the accounts that survive, Bruce Lee was not going to northern Thailand in 1971 to demonstrate anything. He was not there to be seen or recognized, or to test himself in any formal sense. He was there in the same way he was always there. As a person who could not stop looking, who could not sit in front of human capability without wanting to understand the principle beneath it. Surachai chose him from a crowd of 300 people and then spent an hour asking who he was. Because when you have spent your whole life learning to read bodies, learning the specific language that people who have been seriously tested right into the way they sit and breathe and hold their hands, you become very good at recognizing the thing you cannot name. You know it when you see it, even if you cannot say what it is, even if the person carrying it cannot say what it is, even if nobody in the room can say what it is. And maybe that is the question you carry home from an evening like this, if you are lucky enough to be in the third row when it happens. Whether the thing in a person that makes them extraordinary is something they built, or something they found, or something that was always there waiting for them to stop looking anywhere else. Surachai spent an hour trying to answer it. He never did, neither have I.